It's kind of a long story, but so I guess growing up, um, my testimony was pretty just cut and dry. I basically got it the standard Mormon way. I was sitting in seminary, and my seminary teacher said, go home and read the Book of Mormon, and when you finish it, pray and ask God if it's true, and He'll give you the answer. And I was like, oh, all right, sounds simple enough. So I read the Book of Mormon. I finished it. I knelt down, I prayed, and I asked God if it was true, and I got my answer. Like, I just got a really good feeling, and I was like, all right, sweet, Book of Mormon's true, and like, check, like, that was it. Like, some people work for years to like get their witness the Book of Mormon is true. Mine was just like, boom. And so it was almost too good to be true, which it ended up being. So that's kind of the preface. That's when I was about like 16, 17 years old. That's when I kind of got that answer. But anyway, so I'll go out to serve my mission, and I served in the Hawaii Honolulu mission, and I love that place. It's everything people say it is and more. People are always like, oh, you didn't serve a mission, you went on vacation. It's like, well, yeah, kind of. It was just that good. I loved it. But it definitely had its unique challenges. It's a very religiously excited place. And so in one of my areas, it was my second area that I served in, it was called Wahiawa. And what the town was famous for was there's a street called California Avenue. And it holds the Guinness World Record for the most churches on one street in the world. So that tells you what the religious feeling was like in that community. There were like more than 45 churches in the town, and more than 30 of them were on California Avenue. It was insanity. 2 of them were LDS, which was pretty cool, but 2 out of 45 is not very good odds when it comes to preaching to people on the street, trying to get into doors. But I was determined to make the best of it. And so I was in this area, and I was working pretty hard, struggling a little bit. My companion was from the Philippines, and he spoke very, very little English, so we had a lot of communication issues. We struggled as a companionship, to say the least. He had some things he was working through, so some days, frequently, we just would go outside for maybe like 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, and then I get the rest of the day while he was locked inside of the bedroom to study, and lots of time to myself, lots of time to think things through, I guess. But during this time, there were so many anti-Mormons, so many people against the church, and it was just completely abnormal. I've asked other people about it, and they said they never really had a problem when they were in Wahiawa. But just this crazy, unusual amount of people would just like spring out of the woodwork just to bash us, like just to tear us down, just to mess with us. And even some of the investigators that were really promising that we were working with stumbled on anti-Mormon literature, and would just ask us all sorts of questions that, like, to be completely honest, I did not know the answers to. Like, I was always active in the church. I definitely studied. I wasn't the best at studying, but I definitely studied. I definitely worked at it, but there were just things I'd never thought about. And they would just ask me all of these impossible questions that I didn't even think had answers. I was like, wow, I didn't even know that about my own church. So it started really, really messing with me after a while. And it ended up getting really difficult. People would ask me questions about, why did the early church practice polygamy? Why couldn't people of African descent have the priesthood until the 70s? Crazy questions like that. The weirdest things about Joseph Smith, the weirdest things about Brigham Young. So many things that were, so many inconsistencies that people would point out in the Book of Mormon. That it was incredible. It's like every single facet of my faith was assaulted at the same time. But it seemed like there was some greater power, like specifically seeking to wreck my testimony. And it was very effective. And so after a couple months, I would still deny it. I wasn't telling it to anybody, but my testimony was really, really on thin ice. And I was trying to read the Book of Mormon. I was trying to pray. I was trying to do, all the good stuff that they say, if you just do this, if you just have faith, you'll make it through. But I eventually just kind of got really fed up with that. And I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to get answers to hard questions, I'm going to have to look in deep places. So I started looking in places maybe I shouldn't have been looking. And listening to people I maybe shouldn't have been listening to, looking in the, old like ancient institute manuals where some of the things that the leaders of the church said may not have been completely consistent with the gospel as we know it. So that just gave me more questions. And it just got worse and worse and worse until, honestly, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I used to be super confident. I was always that kid in high school. Everyone thought I was like Peter Priest to Goody Two Shoes, just like that solid Mormon everyone looks up to. But I really, at this point, I just did not have a testimony anymore. I didn't know if the Book of Mormon was true. I didn't think that Joseph Smith was a true prophet. I honestly didn't even know if God was there. And that was probably the worst part, because you can change religions, but losing faith in God is, that's a whole different level of pain. So I was going through all of this, and I didn't really know where to go, because I felt like if I talked to anyone about it, well, first of all, my companion didn't really speak English, so I couldn't talk to him about it. I was afraid if I talked to my mission president, he'd be disappointed in me. I was just afraid of everyone being disappointed. I thought about going home so much for my mission. I thought about it so much. And I don't know if I ever would have. It's really hard to say looking back. But I was just too afraid. I was mostly afraid of what my family would think and what my family would say. That's really the main thing that kept me from coming home. But I was really just in a really, really bad place. I felt awful all the time. We were inside the house all day, and when we went outside, we were just getting torn apart. We didn't have any investigators, anybody to work with. It was just really hard. Probably the hardest time of my life, the worst pain I felt, because I'd received my answers in the past. I never forgot the witness that I got that the Book of Mormon was true. I never forgot that. But how could that feeling possibly have been true when there are so many things standing against the church, when there's so many things standing against what I know to be true? And I specifically remember being inside these people's house, and they invited us in. They were super nice. They gave us cookies, but they were just not. They were not genuine people. As soon as we got inside, they started trying to tear apart the Book of Mormon. And I remember the guy asked me, I told him I tried to bear my very feeble testimony that I knew the Book of Mormon was true. And he asked me, how do you know that the spirit you're listening to is the Holy Spirit? Like, how do you know you haven't been deceived all along? And the only reason you believe this stuff is because you grew up this way. And I was like, that was like the last straw on the camel's back, because I didn't know. I didn't understand what the Holy Spirit was like. I didn't understand which one I should have been listening to or any of that. They would just plant these like seeds inside my mind. And so it got to the point where I really was just, I'd had it. And I was so confused. I didn't want to go home. I knew that it should be true, but I didn't understand how it could be. And so I remember one night I was laying in bed. I waited for my companion to fall asleep. And he was asleep. And I kind of just kneeled down next to my bed. And I started praying. And up to that point, I was never a crier. Like nothing made me cry unless I was like really, really mad. But like spiritual things didn't make me cry at all. I was kneeling on my bed or next to my bed, and I was just praying and talking to God. And it was probably the first time that I felt like it was actually a conversation instead of a laundry list. I know people say that all the time, but like it was the first time it really felt genuine. And I didn't know if I was talking to anybody. I was hoping that I was, because that's what, my past experiences had told me. But I was praying and talking. I was just getting nothing for a long time. And then finally, I realized that I was just too prideful to ask for help. I realized I'd stopped reading the Book of Mormon. I'd stopped praying. And the reason I wasn't getting answers was because I was refusing to ask for them. I was so determined to figure things out all by myself, all on my own. I'd be that big important guy that figured out the truth of the gospel by studying some institute manual from the 70s. But I finally decided I just needed to get past myself, and I needed to turn to God. And so I realized this, and I remember specifically saying the words, "I can't do this without you," to God. And like as soon as I said that, I hadn't even finished the phrase, like the most powerful, incredible feeling came over me. I do not know how to describe it. I'd never felt anything like it up to that point. I've never felt anything like it since. I felt very, very strong spiritual feelings, but nothing like this since. And there was no voice, there was no angel, there was no pillar of light, but it was just this feeling of absolute comfort and peace. And that feeling said a lot of things. It told me in the most loving way. It was like God himself was telling me, I've always been here. You know I've always been here. I'm still here and I always will be, and we're going to work through this together. And specifically, I remember it did not tell me that the church was true. That feeling did not tell me that the Book of Mormon was true. That feeling did not tell me that Joseph Smith was a prophet at all. All it told me was, I am God, I am here, and I am here for you. And that was all I needed. That was all I needed in the moment. And so in the coming weeks and months, as I continued to sit in our apartment and study, I put away all the old books, put away all the sketchy material, and I just decided to turn to the Book of Mormon. And it was incredible. After about a week, I was reading the Book of Mormon, and I knelt down and I asked God again if the Book of Mormon was true. I didn't try to figure it out on my own. I read it. I did as much as I could, and I knelt down and I asked God, is the Book of Mormon true? And I got just a very, very subtle answer, like, you know it's true. Get up and keep reading. So I did that. And what's incredible is I wasn't asking for anything more than the answer that God gave me. I just wanted to know that he was there, and that whatever the heck was going to happen next, we'd be able to figure it out together. I didn't know what that meant, but as long as I had, the love of God with me, I could do it all. I didn't really ask for anything beyond that. But through the coming weeks and months and even years until now, that entire massive laundry list of questions that I had, they've all been answered. And I could talk for hours about the answers. I could start my own freaking YouTube series about all the answers that I got since that day. But just suffice it to say that I got the answers to all of those questions that I was wondering about, even the ones that I didn't know had answers. And they were answered so thoroughly and so completely, and they were all answered through basically the Book of Mormon and prayer. That was all I needed. I didn't know that some of those answers could possibly have been in the Book of Mormon. I'd already read it, I read it several times. I studied it in seminary, and just verses started popping out to me that answered questions that, anyways, you get the story. But since then, I just want to testify that I cannot deny the truthfulness of the church anymore. I went through so much. I went through a period when I was pretty sure it wasn't true. I thought about leaving the church. I thought about coming home from my mission. I was in such a bad place. And so I know what it feels like. It's like I almost know what it feels like to leave the church, because in my mind I'd already done it. And so I do not judge anyone who chooses to leave the church. I do not blame them. I do not hate them. I almost understand them because I know what it feels like to lose faith in something that you thought was true for so long and have so many questions about. But for anybody that's still questioning, even for people that have already left the church, just don't stop searching. Make whatever decision you want, but do not stop praying. Do not stop searching. Do not stop reading, and the answers will come. At first, it seems like the more you study, the more questions you get. But after a while, you hit a turning point, and you start to get those answers. And it takes a long time. I still don't have every answer that I would like to have, but I have so many that I'm not going to let the 10,000 answers I do have get lost in the 10 answers that I don't have. So I just want to bear my testimony that it is just undeniably true. And I wish I could just spend hours with anybody that asks me a question to answer these questions for them, but I just know it's true. I know that God's there. I know that God's there. I know the Book of Mormon is true. I know Joseph Smith was a prophet, all of it. And it seems so confusing on the surface, but the deeper you go and the more you search, the better it gets, the clearer everything becomes.